Now we're on to targeted removal. Vindicate. If you're running black and white, you run Vindicate. End of story. Return to Dust. This is an excellent card. In any white deck, you should be running Return to Dust. Because it exiles, not destroys, you can deal with indestructible things. You play it on your turn, you can get rid of 2 threats, or if you need to, in response, you can get rid of 1. It's just so versatile, and the fact that it costs 4 is not really a big deal. Esper Charm, this is, it's a card that I'm still not convinced. I'm running it right now. I'm testing it out, experimenting. But I like it because, in general, I like versatile cards which do more than just one thing. This allows you, I rarely use the discard effect. This allows you to draw or kill an enchantment. This will depend on your metagame, whether people use powerful enchantments or not. I'm thinking of taking this one out in favor of another card I'll show you later. Capsize. If you're running blue, you run Capsize. End of story. I don't know how better to explain it. It lets you. It's an instant speed, so the fact that it only bounces it to hand, at least you have a turn where whatever it is that's a problem is not in play. And late game, you can buy back. You can I've frequently used it to deny opponents access to some of their key utility lands because I go Capsize buyback with a lot of mana. You can get rid of 2 things per turn. They can only play 1. There's no excuse for not running that in blue deck. Same thing with this in a white deck. Oblation. This is amazingly versatile. It's a tuck effect, so you can use it to get rid of generals, or get rid of in a more permanent fashion because it shuffles them into the library. And yes, they draw 2 cards, but the chances are they're not going to draw their general in a 100-card deck. Also, if you need card advantage of your own and you have something you control, say late in the game, a mana rock, and you need to just dig for more useful cards, you can use it on yourself to draw 2 at end of turn. And obviously, you can use it on non-generals as well. Path to Exile. I used to have Condemn in here, but I found that a bit restrictive, so I replaced it with Path to Exile. I mean, this or Swords to Plowshares, I don't really care which one you use. In my opinion, that they're roughly equal. I really don't care about giving someone an extra basic land. Basic lands are not really a threat in this format. Spin into Myth, another tuck effect. Again, as you've seen, I have Oblation. I'm also going to show you Hallowed Burial in this. This is also very good because it's instant. Tuck effects are powerful because they're some of the only effects that can deal with generals and stop them from coming back for a long time. And it does cost 5 mana, so that's a bit of concern. But the fact that it's instant, I think, more than makes up for that. And the fact that my deck has a lot of mana rocks, I can usually afford to play this by turn 4. Mortify. This is very similar to Vindicate. It only hits creatures and enchantments, and it doesn't have the can't be regenerated clause, but it's instant and it's 3 mana and is versatile. What more do you want? Alright. So that was targeted removal. Now we're on to mass removal. Decree of Pain. Massive card advantage. There's no reason not to run this. You can use it for the -2/-2 cycling. Early in the game, or not early, but you can get rid of some annoying things like, in green, Rofalos, for instance, or some of the weaker generals. You can also, but more importantly, you use it to kill everything and draw a bunch of cards. I especially, that I find Reliquary Tower relatively early most of the time. There's no reason to not to run this, and even though it's mass removal, because Zur has Vanishing, I can make Zur phase out and then use Decree of Pain and then draw just way too many cards. Route, instant speed, board sweep. You should never be without this card in any white deck. You can, if you need to, you can pay 5 for it on your turn to sweep, but usually I save it as a surprise, so they attack in response. Route. Hallowed Burial, again, gets rid of generals. Also, gets rid of tokens. With, say you have tokens which are indestructible for one reason or another. A regular board wipe won't deal with them. Hallowed Burial will. Again, I think in my opinion, I'd run this in any white deck, just because of the added ability to get rid of annoying generals. Austere Command. This is too versatile to be without. You can kill all creatures if you need to, or you can deal with troublesome artifacts or enchantments. Yes, it's true in this deck where I run a lot of artifact mana and a lot of powerful enchantments that has the potential to hurt me, but because it's a modal spell, you know, you can always optimize it for your situation at the time. Winds of Wrath. This essentially reads, destroy all creatures except Zur. They can't be regenerated, because Zur will invariably have an enchantment on them by the time you play this. This is, you know, most people sort of laugh when they see this, because almost no one else except Ural, yes, virtually no other generals run auras to the extent that Zur and Ural do. So aside from those decks, you know, you really have nothing to worry about when running this. And, you know, when you just really need to get rid of almost everything, artifacts, creatures, enchantments, Chroma's Vengeance is the way to go, and if you don't need it, you can cycle it away and draw a card. So that's mass removal. Now we're on to, these are sort of utility and card advantage, things like, and counterspells, utility, card advantage. Cryptic Command. I have debated this inclusion in Zur because it does cost 3 blue, and as you've seen when I showed you my mana base, I have very many colorless producing lands, so sometimes it is difficult to come up with 3 blue, especially when I'm also trying to keep 2 blue open for Vanishing for Zur. So I have debated this, but I've kept it in just because it is so versatile. You can counter a spell, you can stop your opponents from attacking you for a turn, you can bounce things, and you can draw a card. So you'll notice that I don't have very many counterspells, and the counterspells I have I include because they do useful things other than just counterspell, like Hinder, for example. This is very useful against generals. Obviously you can tech them, but also it's useful against powerful spells because a simple counterspell will put the spell in the graveyard where it will easily be recurred via Regrowth or Eternal Witness or Yawgmoth's Will or something like that. This makes it actually harder to recur the spell than a regular counterspell. Forbid. Obviously once you've used Necropotence, your hand is huge. You can pay the buyback cost many times over. This allows you to say no repeatedly. Dromar's Charm. This is a counterspell, but also the other modes can be useful. The -2/-2 allows you to kill, say, an Omnath before he has, you know, if on turn 3 for 3 mana he plays an Omnath, he hasn't had a chance to pump him yet, or if they play a Rofelos, you can stop them from getting an advantage with the -2/-2. Also, the 5 life clause is not entirely irrelevant because, remember, once you have Necropotence out, 5 life is 5 cards. So I've actually used that just to be able to pay more life to draw more cards without being worried that I'm in striking distance yet from having paid too much life. And Pact of Negation. I run this over Force of Will because I don't have, as you can see, I have blue cards, but I don't have enough blue cards that I would reliably always have another one in my hand to be able to pitch to Force of Will, so I use this when I need to for a free counterspell. So card advantage and tutoring, opportunity, instant speed, drawing 4 cards, always very good. I've debated whether or not to replace this with Stroke of Genius because Stroke of Genius later in the game can allow you to draw more. At 6 mana, this is more efficient than Stroke of Genius because at 6, Stroke will only allow you to draw 3, but Stroke scales better. So, you know, that's something which is open for debate. And, of course, the tutors. Any black deck, these 2 tutors are mandatory in any black deck. There's absolutely no reason to be without any of them. And in a blue deck, you know, where obviously this allows me to find my mass removal, my spot removal, basically whatever I need at the time. The tutor I don't run, which I could, is Enlightened Tutor, but because my general finds all the enchantments that I play, I really have no reason to play Enlightened Tutor. You know, my artifacts are for the most part mana artifacts, and my enchantments my general can find, so I don't need Enlightened Tutor. Next section. Okay, so that was card advantage and utility. The next section are utility creatures. So, Weathered Wayfarer. This is a new addition. It is very useful because it allows you to find any land for a single mana and tap. The only restriction is your opponent has to have more land than you. Now, because my deck relies on artifact acceleration, and many of my opponents who run green run land acceleration, it is practically inevitable that my opponents will control more land than me, because I'm only doing one land drop per turn, whereas as soon as an opponent gets a Primeval Titan, this restriction is no longer really relevant. So, and the fact that you can find any land depending on your situation, I run so many utility lands that this will actually allow me to find an answer to many of my opponent's threats. You know, I'll find Reliquary Tower first, then I'll find Serra Sanctum to get the extra mana, and then I can find a Maze of Ith if I'm being threatened, or I can find Vesiva to get rid of an opponent's legendary land, anything like that. Very useful. Bane of the Living. This is essentially another mass removal. I included this for a couple of reasons. One, because I noticed many decks that run black run this, and it's a good bluff because it's black and X. When you turn it face up, all creatures get -X, so it's a board wipe if you have the mana. But also, I run, as you'll see, I run Willbender, which is another morph card, and this was really the only morph I ran in my deck, so people would always know that I was a Willbender when I had it face down. This way, I can play this face down with blue mana available, and then I can sort of bluff them. Are you going to take the risk and play that Time Warp or Time Stretch when I have 2 blue and a face down creature? Is it a Willbender, or is it just a Bane of the Living? So this that allows me a little bit more flexibility, but at the same time, it's a good card in its own right. All right, so Willbender, obviously, great surprise. It just allows you to, it should be in any EDH deck that runs blue. It allows you to redirect all sorts of things all over the place, so most frequently is Time Warp and Time Stretch and things like that. I used to run Time Stretch in this deck, but I just found that it was much too risky because of Reiterate and Wild Ricochet and Willbender and Redirect and Reverberate, that it's almost inevitable in a multiplayer game where or at least where someone else is running blue or red, that you will not get as much advantage as the other person will. So this is a good deterrent for that. So Willbender. Solemn Simulacrum should be in any EDH deck. It replaces itself when it dies, so it's a chump blocker, and you get to draw a card. And it's land-based acceleration. There is no reason not to play this. Any deck can play it because it's colorless. Fleshbag Marauder, a recent addition. This is better than similar cards that are spells. There's, I can't remember the name of them. There's a spell that's 1 black, each player sacrifices a creature, and then there's Barter and Blood, which is 2 black, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. Because this is a creature, it provides you with something to sacrifice. So that way, if I have Zur out, I don't need to phase him out, right? I can just play this, and he's the creature that I sacrifice, and then all my opponents have to sacrifice a creature. So that's very useful. Vedalken Plotter. This is a card that not many people expect to see. It's one of the ways, aside from Strip Mine and Dust Bowl and Vindicate and things like that, that I can deal with annoying lands that my opponents control, because it allows me to take them. So frequently I'll play him, and I'll give my opponent some basic land or something that it doesn't like. If I control a Urborg, it doesn't matter whether I control it or they control it, it has the same effect. So I'll trade them something that I don't need, and I'll take their very useful land. Maze of Ith, for example, and I'd just like to note that the flavor text of this card pretty much summarizes this deck. Fair? At what point in our negotiations did you convince yourself my goal was to be fair? One of my favorite flavor texts. And finally, for utility creatures, is Necrotic Sliver. It does cost, if you want to use this effect right away, it does cost 6. But the fact that you can amortize the cost over 2 turns is significant. It can act as a chump blocker, and then so you can block, and in response you can use its ability. It essentially is a second Vindicate. This should be run in any black-white deck, even though it's not a Sliver deck. It's very infrequent that you'll find an opponent who runs Slivers who can gain a benefit from your having this on the table. So there's no reason not to run this. Okay, so that was utility creatures. We're on to utility artifacts. There are not many of them, but there are some significant ones. This one, Lightning Greaves. This is with a demonic tutor or a vampiric tutor, this is the first card I will find usually, because it is enormously helpful. It costs 2, equip for 0, and allows Zur to attack right away, and it protects him. So if I have this, then when I attack with Zur, I can find Vanishing, and I don't need to find Diplomatic Immunity because he already has Shroud. Reito Lantern. This is amazing in Zur. If you have the mana, and you know, I'll frequently have enough mana, especially once I get out Serra Sanctum, you can use it to, in case any of your enchantments get destroyed, you can put them on the bottom of your deck, which allows you to find them again with Zur whenever you attack. But also, it says put target card in the graveyard, so you can use it on cards in opponents' graveyards in response to their recursion effect. So if they say, I play Eternal Witness says return target card, so they have to announce the target as soon as the triggered ability goes on stack. In response to that, you target the same card with this effect, and then their recursion effect fizzles. So it's very good both to use on yourself and to use on your opponent. Nihil Spellbomb, one of the several cheap, 1 or 0 mana artifacts which get rid of graveyards. This is just up to personal preference. I prefer this to Tormod's Crypt because the 1 mana over 0 mana isn't really a big deal, and the fact that you can pay 1 to draw a card helps. I also prefer this over things like Scrabbling Claws, or I don't know, it was like Phyrexian Furnace or something like that, or Relic of Progenitus, because Relic of Progenitus gets rid of all graveyards, and I will frequently want to recur stuff from my graveyard, and Scrabbling Claws only gets rid of 1 card at a time. So this is my preferred choice for Artifact Graveyard Hate. And Expedition Map, finishing up for utility artifacts. This card allows me to go and find the lands that I need, so frequently, again, like I said, frequently will be Reliquary Tower first. If I already have Reliquary Tower, this will allow me to find Serra Sanctum and any of the other utility lands that I need, so that's very helpful. And the final category of cards in my deck are what I call Haymaker spells. These are the spells which, when they resolve, have a big effect on the game, usually. Acquire. I run Acquire and Bribery. These are 2 cards in the same vein. This lets me find an opponent's artifact, and this lets me find an opponent's creature. Against green decks, this will usually find a Terastodon or a Avenger of Zendikar. Both of these cards can find against other blue, black, white decks, can find a Magister Sphinx, which can be very devastating. And sometimes, Acquire will usually go to find an opponent's. If I haven't found my own Lightning Greaves already, I'll find my opponent's Lightning Greaves, because most players run Lightning Greaves. Or alternatively, I'll find some powerful equip, so Sword of Fire and Ice or Umezawa's Jite. That way I can boost Zur's abilities to an even greater extent. Consecrated Sphinx. This card is simply obscene. No blue deck should be without it in EDH. It allows you to draw even more ridiculous amounts of cards than Rhystic Study. After 1 round, for 6 mana and 1 round at the table, you'll frequently have drawn 8 to 10 cards. Also, if an opponent has an effect like a Rhystic Study that allows them to draw extra, you can draw even more. There's no reason not to run this. It works with Imperial Armor on Zur, and it just gives you more options. More cards in hand is always good. Memory Plunder. This is another diamond in the rough. I don't see many people running it. It allows you, if someone else manages to to get a Time Warp or Time Stretch effect off, or even if you counter it, this allows you to play it from their graveyard at instant speed. Same thing with Wrath effects. Most people don't. People expect Rout because people know about Rout. But even if you don't have Rout, if someone else has a Wrath of God in their graveyard, you can go at instant speed, I Memory Plunder your Wrath of God. So you've got a second instant speed Wrath effect, which is very powerful. Anything that not only allows you to make use of your opponent's resources, but also to do so, to use sorceries at instant speed is very powerful. Rite of Replication. This is there to deal with green decks which run powerful creatures. So Rite of Replication on an Avenger of Zendikar or Terrastodon is a very, very, very powerful effect. If that's not available, I could always use it on my own Angel of Despair or Magister Sphinx, or any of my utility creatures. Yeah, again, no blue deck should be without this card. So speaking of which, Angel of Despair, a 5/5 flyer plus a Vindicate for 7 mana is always excellent. It gives you a blocker besides Zur and kills problematic permanents. And obviously is excellent with Rite of Replication. Magister Sphinx. I prefer this over Sorin Markov, which has a similar effect, because Magister Sphinx can also attack, and with Lightning Greaves, it can attack the turn it comes into play, so effectively bringing an opponent down to 5 if they have no flying blockers. You are vulnerable because having this card in your deck means that you can have Bribery or Acquire played on you and have this effect used against you. I think that is a risk that I'm willing to take, especially once I've got Solitary Confinement out, I can't be targeted, so I'm not really worried about it, and the effect is just so powerful. And finally, Yawgmoth's Will. I often joke that the text of this card should simply read, "Do it again," because effectively that is what it allows you to do. It allows you to play any of your powerful effects. If you need spot removal and you've already used some of it, this will allow you to recur it very easily. You'll get your mana artifacts back, whatever, your lands back if your opponent has looped your land somehow. Any black deck should run this. Yeah, alright, so that is it for the deck.